The smell of a high school after dark is something you never get used to. It's a mix of industrial floor wax, stale sweat from the locker rooms, and something else, something dusty and old that settles in the back of your throat when the ventilation shuts off. I was scraping a piece of hardened gum off a desk in room 204 when the hallway lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then they buzzed with that angry, electric hum that makes your teeth ache. I froze, my putty knife hovering over the graffiti carved into the wood. I checked my watch. 2:13 a.m. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wasn't supposed to be on the second floor after 2 a.m. That was rule number 4. And I had just broken it. If you're listening to this, and you're looking for a job in upstate New York, stay away from Oak Haven High. The pay is $25 an hour, full benefits, and you get your weekends off. But if you value your sanity, or your life, keep driving. My name is David. I took the job because the heating bills in Syracuse were eating me alive and my truck needed a new transmission. When I interviewed with the head custodian, a man named Mr. Henderson who looked like he hadn't slept since the Reagan administration, he didn't ask about my experience with floor buffers or chemical safety. He asked if I was good at following instructions. Exact instructions. I told him I was. He hired me on the spot, handed me a keyring heavy enough to be a weapon, and gave me a laminated sheet of paper. "Read this," Henderson had croaked, his voice like gravel in a blender. "Memorize it. Do not lose it. And David, do not get curious." I thought he was just being a hard ass. Then I read the paper. It wasn't a cleaning schedule. It was a list of rules titled, Protocol for Night Staff, Oak Haven High School. Here is what it said. Rule 1, the shift starts at 9 p.m. Lock the front doors immediately. If you see a student knocking on the glass after 9:05 p.m., do not let them in. Even if they are crying. Even if they are screaming your name. They are not students. Rule 2, clean the library first. If the motion detectors in the stacks are triggered, do not look at the security monitors. Just leave the library and lock the doors. Wait 1 hour before returning. Rule 3, avoid the drama department's storage closet. If you must enter to clean, do not make eye contact with the mannequin in the red dress. If the mannequin is wearing a blue dress, leave the room immediately and radio Mr. Henderson. Rule 4, the second floor is off limits between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. We call this the recess. You do not want to see who is playing. Rule 5, if you hear a basketball bouncing in the gymnasium, verify that the lights are off. If the lights are off and the bouncing continues, throw a single tennis ball into the dark gym and close the door. Do not enter until the next shift. Rule 6, locker 303 in the west wing has been welded shut. If you hear scratching from inside, bang on the metal 3 times with your mop handle. If the scratching stops, you are safe. If it gets louder, run to the boiler room and lock yourself in until sunrise. Rule 7, never acknowledge the janitor who whistles. There are only 2 of us on the night shift, you and me. I do not whistle. I remember laughing when I first read them. I thought it was a hazing ritual for the new guy. Henderson didn't laugh. He just lit a cigarette beneath the "no smoking" sign and stared at me until I stopped smiling. "You think it's funny," he said. "The guy before you thought it was funny. We found him curled up in the trophy case. He hasn't spoken a word in 6 months. My first week was quiet. Creepy, sure, old schools always are, but quiet. I started to relax. I convinced myself the rules were just Henderson's way of keeping people on their toes. Then came Tuesday of my second week. I was mopping the long hallway outside the cafeteria. The silence in a school that big is heavy. It pushes down on you. I was humming to myself, wringing out the mop, when I heard it. Thump. Thump. Squeak. the distinct, rhythmic sound of a basketball hitting the hardwood floor. It was coming from the gym. I felt a cold prickle run down my neck. I looked at the double doors of the gymnasium. Through the narrow safety glass, I could see pitch blackness. The lights were definitely off. Thump. Thump. It was heavy. Rhythmic. Deliberate. I walked toward the doors, my grip on the mop handle tightening until my knuckles turned white. My rational brain was screaming that a kid had broken in. Some teenager playing a prank. I reached for the handle, ready to flip the lights and yell at some trespassers. Then I remembered Rule 5. Throw a single tennis ball into the dark gym. It felt ridiculous. I felt like an idiot. But Henderson had made me keep a tennis ball in my pocket at all times. I pulled it out, the fuzz rough against my sweating palm. I cracked the door open just an inch. The air that drifted out wasn't the smell of sweat and rubber, it smelled like wet earth and copper. Like a grave that had been dug up in the rain. The bouncing didn't stop. Thump. Thump. I took a breath and tossed the ball into the darkness. I heard it hit the floor. Plop. Silence. The bouncing stopped instantly. I waited, holding my breath, straining to hear footsteps or a giggle. Nothing. Just absolute, suffocating silence. Then, from the center of the pitch-black court, a voice whispered. It sounded wet, like a throat filled with water. Missed. I slammed the door and locked it. I didn't go back to the gym corridor for 3 nights. When I told Henderson, he just nodded and wrote something in his logbook. Good, was all he said. It likes to play. But tonight was different. Tonight I messed up. I had been scrubbing graffiti in room 204. I got lost in the work, trying to get the permanent marker off the desk. I lost track of time. When the lights flickered and the buzzing started, and I saw 2:13 a.m. on my watch, I knew I was in the middle of Rule 4. The recess. I grabbed my bucket and moved to the door, peering out into the hallway. The long corridor of the second floor stretched out in both directions, lined with lockers. But the atmosphere had shifted. The air was hazy, like a low fog had rolled in. And the temperature had dropped 20 degrees. I could see my breath puffing out in white clouds. Then I heard the giggling. It wasn't happy laughter. It was high-pitched, frantic, and coming from everywhere at once. It sounded like a recording of children laughing played backward and slowed down. I stepped out, trying to make it to the stairwell. Ring around the rosy, a voice sang. It came from the ceiling vents. Pocket full of teeth. I walked faster, my boots squeaking on the linoleum. Slam. A locker door flew open 10 feet in front of me. Slam. Another one, to my left. Slam. 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 Suddenly, every locker in the hallway began to bang open and shut in a violent, deafening rhythm. The metal clanging echoed like gunshots. I dropped my bucket. Soapy water spilled across the floor. I broke into a run. Teacher says you're late, a voice shrieked right in my ear. I spun around, swinging my putty knife, but there was nothing there but the swirling fog. I sprinted toward the exit sign, my heart rate maxing out. The lockers were vibrating now, shaking the walls. Shadows seemed to detach themselves from the floor, stretching out, grasping at my ankles. They looked like long, distorted arms. I reached the stairwell door and shoved it open, practically falling down the first flight of stairs. I didn't stop until I hit the first floor, gasping for air, my chest burning. I sat there for 10 minutes, shaking, listening to the faint sounds of chaos drifting down from above. Then, as the clock clicked over to 3 a.m., the noise stopped. Just like that. The building settled back into its groaning silence. I stood up, wiping sweat from my forehead, telling myself I just needed to finish the shift. I just needed to get to 5 a.m. I picked up my gear and headed toward the west wing to check the bathrooms. I was walking past the trophy case near the main office when I heard whistling. It was a jaunty, happy tune. Yankee Doodle Dandy. I stopped. Down the hall, near the teacher's lounge, I saw a figure. It was a man in a gray uniform, just like mine. He was pushing a mop bucket, his back to me. "Hey," I called out, relief flooding my system. "Henderson. You scared the hell out of me. The second floor is going crazy tonight." The figure stopped mopping. The whistling stopped. He didn't turn around. He just stood there, perfectly still. That's when I noticed the uniform. It was gray, yes, but it was tattered. And the water in his mop bucket, it was thick and dark. It looked like oil. Or blood. Rule 7 flashed in my mind. Never acknowledge the janitor who whistles. I do not whistle. My blood ran cold. The figure slowly began to turn its head. Not its body, just its head. It turned past the shoulder, past where a neck should stop, twisting around with a sickening crunch of cartilage until it was facing me completely backward. The face was smooth. No eyes. No nose. Just a mouth, a vertical slit that had been stitched shut with thick, black wire. I didn't wait. I didn't scream. I ran. I bolted for the boiler room, the only place Henderson said was safe. I could hear heavy, wet footsteps slapping against the tiles behind me. Fast. Much faster than a human should run. I slammed into the boiler room door, fumbling for my keys. The keys jingled, slipping in my sweaty hands. Slap. 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 The footsteps were getting closer. I could hear a wheezing sound, like air escaping a punctured lung. I found the key. I jammed it into the lock. I turned it and threw myself inside, slamming the heavy iron door and throwing the deadbolt just as something collided with the other side. Bang. The door shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Bang. "Let me in, David," a voice mimicked. It sounded exactly like Henderson. "I just want to check your work." I backed away, sliding down the wall until I hit the floor. I'm sitting here now, next to the furnace. It's 4:15 a.m. The banging stopped an hour ago, but I can still hear the whistling outside the door. Soft. Patient. I'm recording this on my phone because I don't know if the sun is going to come up today. Or if it does, if I'll be the one to open the door. If you ever find a job posting for Oak Haven High School, if you see the pay and think it's too good to be true, just remember rule number 7. And whatever you do, don't look at the lockers. I think I hear the keys jingling in the lock from the outside. I have the only key. I have the only key.